Hey everyone, Amiya here from Resonance Astrology, and welcome to my channel. Today I'm joined by Shae, aka martianlune, and we are starting off a brand new podcasty type of series that is going to be available on YouTube and on Spotify, this time with our lovely faces. And it's a planetary series, which I have been wanting to do for a longer while. I love the planets. For me, the planets really form like the base structure and like the skeleton and the backbone of astrology. And once you know the planets, I feel like then the rest makes a lot more sense. And so I have a lot of planetary enthusiasts with with me along the way for this journey. And we're gonna start it off with the moon because we're going in Chaldean order. And so the moon is the first planet there. And yeah, by this point, I want to let Shae first also introduce herself, and then we're going to talk a bit more.
Thank you, Maya. Yes, I am Shae, aka martianlune, aka the Moon's Bitch. I am a Cancer rising, in case you couldn't tell. And I have been a practicing tarot reader and astrologer for the past 5 years. Been studying astrology since 2016, 2017. And working with the moon, working with the lunar cycles is a big part of my practice, and it's a big part of what I have shaped a lot of my projects and offerings around. So I'm super excited to be here today to talk about Lady Luna.
Yeah, no, that's amazing. And you were really the first person that came to my mind. I was like, she's Martian Loon. Like she's the moon's bitch. Like I gotta call her on. So I'm excited having you here. And just to kind of like maybe give a brief overview, we're first going to get a bit technical with everything, kind of explain and go in depth with the rulerships, which will also involve like the dignities, because going through the dignities gives us a real good insight of that planet and like the different ways it can like express itself. We're also going to talk about, yeah, that also falls into technicality, kind of like the joy of the moon in the third house, um, like everything that the moon symbolizes, and probably also going to be a lot of like myth and like also storytelling. And we're definitely also going to talk about like, kind of like rulerships and all of that. And just like what the moon kind of does. And then also in a more practical level, we're going to talk about like transit wise, perfection year wise, also how you can build a relationship to the moon, because that's, I feel like, a very important factor in how your astrology can improve very much. And honestly, the moon is like probably the easiest planet, so to say, that you can start building a relationship with. So we're going to touch upon that. Is there anything you would add that I have forgotten?
No, I think you covered it. I'm super excited to dive in.
Okay, well, that's great. Then let's dive in. Also, wait, actually, what I do want to mention is that we're recording this while the moon is still in Cancer. It's a bit past the new moon, but the moon is still in Cancer, so she's at in her home sign. So we are really bringing in that energy. And again, actually, let me say that regardless, I did not say that until now. Just like recording this on Thursday, June 22nd, 26th, 2025, at around like 8, 9 p.m. Central European time, a bit earlier your time, but but just to have a certain amount of time. And yes, so there is a lot of like Cancerian energy in the air. I mean, Jupiter is there, Sun's there, Mercury, no, Mercury moved into Leo today.
Yes,
Um,
it is.
but yeah, there are a lot of like moon Cancerian energy in the air, in the waters. So I do feel like that's also beneficial to really like hone in and like harness the energies since they're so like relevant right now.
Absolutely. You know, the moon and everything that it represents is being heavily pushed into the collective consciousness right now. Um, I'm seeing that on definitely a very personal level, but seeing it on a global scale as well. So I think it's excellent timing for us to be recording this.
Great. And maybe just a bit more for funsies, just to like give the people our moon placements just so they kind of know where we're coming from.
Absolutely. Well, as Martian Loon, I am a Scorpio moon in whole signs fifth house, which is my chart ruler.
Yeah, and I just just have a Gemini moon. It's up in the eighth house, a bit hidden. But yeah, yeah. I mean, we're going to talk more about the Scorpio moon since there is like a dignity scheme going on there. We're not going to
Oh,
talk so much
yes.
about Gemini moon today. Would probably be super interesting, maybe in the future, doing a series of like going through the planets, through the all the signs, but
Oh,
it's not going to
yes.
happen today. We're just going to go over the dignities. So, um, let's get some of the basics out of the way. The moon, in astrology is considered a planet, but technically it falls into the category of like a luminary, which is next to the sun. Both the moon and the sun are both luminaries. And so I guess the question here is, and maybe like you can answer that question, is like, how do you feel like these two compare to each other as like luminaries in the sky?
Yeah, absolutely. So, being a luminary, both the sun and the moon, they have the most direct physical, tangible impact on us here on Earth, right? The moon controls the tides, the sun dictates our patterns of waking and sleeping, it makes things grow, as does the moon. Um, but in terms of being a luminary and what that means in the schema of astrology, is that those are two major components of our makeup, of our consciousness, how our personalities and perceptions are shaped. But in contrasting them, the sun generates its own light, whereas the moon reflects the light of the sun, which is why the moon gets that association of reflecting our internal landscape, our emotional perception. Because basically, the light of the moon is just an impression or a memory of the sun's light. It's not a direct mirror, but it is projecting its own image of what the sun's light is for us, creating something else entirely. Um, but I think it is important to note just how deep and personal the moon is for people, because if it's memories, if it's impressions, the moon is how we shape our own interpretations of things. It's what gives us our own perceived reality. It's our feelings and our thoughts are what influence our feelings, our opinions, um, and those things being presided over by the most changeable, most cyclical planetary body, um, indicates that all of those things, our feelings, our opinions, they can all rapidly change. Um, Whereas the sun does not move as quickly as the moon. So the nature of the luminaries, just simply in the way that they cycle through the zodiac and the way that they move, um, is very different right off the bat.
It is, yeah. Yeah, like the sun is so fixed. It's like this center of our solar system. The
Mm-hmm.
moon is like so quick, so adaptable, so changeable. And we can observe both with our naked eye, right? Like we see the moon changing its phases. We also see the sun, but obviously the sun doesn't change its phases. It just rises again and again, and it has this consistency to it where the moon, it has a consistency to it as well in the form that it's like it's constantly doing its waves and motions, but it is differing. Like every few days, it's different. Whereas the sun, like it comes and shines and then it goes again. I mean, at least from our perspective, the sun obviously does not physically do that in the solar system. But just to like kind of give that comparison, yeah, to talk a bit more about that. Um, and I also like what you say about like the soaking in because the moon also like in a birth chart, when we look towards the moon, it is something that we can look towards when we want to see what kind of environment somebody grew up in and what is
Yes.
the environment, if not something that deeply shaped our impressions by everything that was around us when we were born. So our like we are the product of our environment that we were kind of born into and that like shapes us. And we learn how to deal with emotions or how not to deal with emotions, depending on like the caregivers we had around us or other people or how like they dealt with certain things. And so there's really this interesting thing of like the moon serving as something that like takes in things and processes them through something else.
Yes, very well said. It wherever the moon is, whatever it is being touched by, whatever sign and house it's in, that is the nature of the impressions that are being made upon the moon, therefore influencing what's happening internally. Um, but of course, because our environment is subject to a lot of change throughout the course of life, the moon represents that aspect of self that can see um, many changes throughout life, some happening in very rapid succession.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. And also there's we usually think of the moon in terms of emotions. But the moon is also, again, it's first of all the environment, but also like the whole kind of mind, but also mind as in like the whole body.
Yes,
Um,
the mind body.
yeah, exactly, the mind body, which gets shaped by what? Well, our environment once again. So
Yes,
there's something very, and I mean also if we look at you know, like pregnancies, which is like our first home, so to say. Um, like what happens there during our stay in the mother's womb is we're also already getting information. And already that part, like not even outside of the womb yet, is already kind of doing things to us and can potentially shape us in pleasant, unpleasant ways, depending on how the pregnancy was. And then I'm also thinking how, I mean, the birth is like literally the most important thing in astrology because that's our
mm,
birth chart. Our birth chart is our birth.
yes. Well, it's interesting that you mentioned that because the condition and placement of the moon can reflect the experience of you being born and the
True, yeah.
experience that your birth giver had of actually giving birth to you. Um, my mine, I think, is very literal because my mother labored with me for 24 hours. So a Mars ruled moon, very
Mhm.
laborious, physically testing. So sorry, mom. Love you very much. Thanks for birthing me.
I can see that, yeah. I'm wondering how I could apply that in my chart because my mother had a water birth with both me and my brother,
Hmm.
which is not really Gemini moon-like, you could say. But it was a yeah, I associate it with other things, more so the fact that like my sun is right on my ascendant. And like I was born at sunrise on Sunday. That's like more sun episode to be honest. But it's like in Scorpio and the fact that I was like born into water.
Yes,
I like that. And
I
water
like that
births,
expression
yeah,
too.
totally. Yeah, and just the water element. I mean, yeah, in and of itself is so linked to birth. Even if you didn't have a water birth. But
Yes,
just because like your mother, so to say, like carried you in her waters. So there is something deeply linked to that water element, which is, yeah, probably like a good segment to maybe start talking about the dignities um within the moon, which I
yes.
mean, first of all, we can literally just talk about the home sign of the moon and its domicile, which is another word for home sign, and that's Cancer. Do you want to take the lead on that first?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, when you think about the symbolism of Cancer coming through with um, the crab is unique in that it carries its home with it. You know, it is able
Hmm.
to retract the rest of its physical form to be within its protective shell. Um, you know, Cancer being cardinal, being water, you know, it's a very intuitive sign. Um, but I think people underestimate the cardinal portion of Cancer's identity because the thing that is so unique and special about Cancer as an energy is the way it is able to harness emotional momentum and translate it into action, into creation as well. Um, but Cancer is associated with caregiving, associating with protecting what it has nurtured, what it has fostered and created. We think of home, we think of maternal lineage, um, of all things comfort and familiarity oriented. Um, those are the things that come to mind when I think about the sign of Cancer. But why the moon finds its home here is because the moon, like we've said, is this ever changing, very cyclical planet. And it likes to have its home be somewhere comfortable, you know, somewhere that literally feels like home, a sign that can give that nourishment and that level of stability as well. And Cancer definitely is a soft place for the moon to land. That's why it finds its home there.
Yeah, I feel like there's something deeply like primally instinctual about Cancer that Cancer often doesn't get enough credit for. And I
Yes,
feel like it's these what you said before, kind of like riding that emotional wave and like that intuition that comes from just like that emotional intelligence in its best form
yes,
to like just kind of intuitively feel what is the right thing to do right now or like how to maybe take care of somebody. When we look at
yes,
intellectual intelligence, we obviously would look to something like Mercury, but the moon is really like emotional intelligence, and that's not to be underestimated. Can also usually be super helpful in like crises moments, because then there isn't like logic your way out of it. It's like, no, we need to intuitively kind of feel what is the right thing to do right now. Like, what does somebody need? And Cancer also has so much to do with safety, which is also, again, the symbolism is so interesting of the crab that has its own shell. It kind of carries its safety with it. And I think that's interesting, not to mix like too many dignities in here because this episode is about the moon, not Cancer. But if we just look at the Cancer, it has the moon and Jupiter that does extremely well there, but then both the malefic planets, Saturn and Mars, don't do well in the sign of Cancer. So this is why Cancer fights so differently because it kind of needs to form that protection itself. Like it's not something it's naturally good at. Like some of the other signs that have like better malefic signatures in them. Like that's just what is coming to my mind here.
yes. I'm thinking of how because of the moon's very changeable nature, how the structure or the regimented course of action that Saturn might enact, that's not something that comes naturally to Cancer or to lunar energy in general. You know, the phrase, I don't feel like doing that,
Mm, mhm.
that's a very lunar thing. You know, the
Yeah.
the moon is going to move when it feels called to move and not before. which again, like you said, very helpful in crisis moments when survival needs to be prioritized. That protective, self-preserving instinct can kick in and serve very well. Definitely good to have a Cancerian person. Bonus if it's a Cancer moon person around you in times of crisis. Very grateful for my Cancer moon partner that I live with for that very reason.
Yeah, I love it. There's definitely something very moody about Cancer, which I mean it makes sense. I mean it makes sense that emotions and moods, feelings do get prescribed to the moon because they are so subjective and changeable and mutable. And there's just something about the moon that is very comes very natural to that. And I feel like sadly, the world is not equipped to with that so much. I feel like a lot of people I've interacted with, and again, sadly, especially men with cancer placement, there's something about like I shouldn't constantly change my mood, but it's like what if that's a good thing? Like you don't have to
Mm,
feel the same at 9 a.m. and like 6 p.m. Like it's okay to like go through multiple notions throughout the day. I feel like cancer is kind of a bit of the allowance to all of us, also collectively right now, to just be like, hey, it's okay to feel a lot of feelings. Like that's human.
yes. To experience the high tide and low tide, the ebb and flow
Mm.
of our energy, that's another reason why I think the moon is at home in Cancer, because it is attuned to, hey, this level that I may be operating at right now, that's not something that is going to be maintained constantly. Um, so I think Cancer is also very anchored into the moon's ties and rulership over the physical body, in that it's a sign that's going to be very good at checking in with how they are feeling physically as well as emotionally, before they decide what course of action to take and how to tend to that, how to care for whatever needs are being presented.
Yeah, it's like a good skill to have. Very underestimated by many people, but
It is, it
yeah.
is, it is a very excellent skill to have and difficult to cultivate because I feel like sometimes we don't even register that that is something that we can work at, we can grow. Um, and we can circle back to this when we move on to moon finding fall in Scorpio, but I feel like that's something that I definitely struggled with
Mm.
before hitting my Saturn square.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, yeah, we could, I mean, let's not talk about the fall yet, but I feel like we definitely can talk about the exaltation of the moon first, which is in the sign of Taurus. Definitely feels very much like the temple of the earth, the goddess. And Taurus is the realm of a strong moon and Venus. So there's something that's like, for me, there's just, it's very highly linked to earth, and also to the earthly pleasure. Why, and also the reason why, not Cancer, Taurus is so much related to the senses, not in the way maybe like Cancer, but like the bodily senses, like the earthly body, our physical flesh body, and
Yes.
like the joy of experiencing that, like the joy of experiencing the beauty of eating yummy food, of
Yeah.
looking at a beautiful artwork or seeing flowers bloom in spring. That's like what comes to my mind immediately when I think of the exaltation.
Yes. I think the moon finding exaltation in Taurus, a Venus ruled sign, a planet that is focused on enjoyment and taking delight in your own pleasure and really sinking into tactile, sensual experiences. this to me illustrates that the moon is like a very lusty planet, you know, getting to exalt in a Venus ruled sign. I think that's something that gets overlooked as well. You know, the moon, if the moon is what we feel, we might feel passionately, we might feel attracted towards something. And I think that's something that is enhanced and really comes through here um, in its exaltation. If you have someone that has an exalted moon in your life, you probably know, even if you don't know, because they this is the bougie person, or maybe even if they don't have expensive taste, although we could definitely attribute that here. This is someone who is not going to rush themselves when they are partaking in something that they enjoy or find pleasure in. In fact, they're going to slow that down as much as they possibly can to get full enjoyment, full pleasure, and full presence out of it.
Yeah, I'm also thinking how, I mean, Taurus is the bull. Um, and there's something so sacred. I mean, even in India, if we go there, about like the mother bull and like the fertility of
Yes.
that. And there's something
Mm-hmm.
extremely fertile, both in the sign of Taurus and in the sign of Cancer.
Yes, both very
Um,
lunar.
Exactly. And both of them again have like also the benefics in a good place. So it makes a lot of sense that the moon kind of loves to go to these benefic planets and like kind of does well with Jupiter and also with Venus. And then there's
Yes.
just something incredibly like fertile there of like creation and birthing can also be in a metaphorical way of like birthing an idea
Mm-hmm.
into physicality, which again is also a very like sensory intuitive thing you do. I feel like every artist can probably relate to that process of like what it means to like birth an idea into the world, and again
Mm.
how much like how big of an emotional process that is also. And I'm thinking of a quote which I don't know who said that, but just like the good art is the one that changes the artist. Um,
Yes.
which I feel like is kind of like applicable there too. I guess in this case, like both
Mm.
Taurus and Cancer. But yeah.
You're bringing to mind the phrase "a labor of love," which I would definitely attribute to creative and artistic pursuits that can be um, very powerfully channeled through the moon in its domicile and in its exaltation. Lots of musicians, artists have either exalted or domicile moon. I have found.
Yeah, yeah, there's there was like a time in my life where I was listening to a lot of emo trap, which I feel like I don't look like the person that does that, but uh, I had a different style and a lot of these rappers had like Cancer moons. I was surprised. And so there's definitely
Yeah,
something about like channeling that like emotions, you know, not every rapper does that, like specifically emo trap, which is like yeah, about like a lot of depressive feelings and everything. And uh I think like
I think
Puya,
Juice World actually
oh, I think so too.
has
Yeah, I think so
Cancer
too.
moon. I believe that's correct.
Yeah, there's lots of uh I think Lil Peep had too, if I'm not mistaken. And
That
I
sounds
think like
familiar.
Puya or Puja, sorry, I never know how to pronounce his name. But he has a song which is called Mood Swing Misery. Like I can't keep like I always think about that when
So
I think
lunar.
about
Oh my gosh.
Cancer moons. And like yeah, like the goodness, but also like the challenges that come with constantly like going through that notions of that ebb and flow and like having these mood swings in a world that is not adapt so much to like holding that these mood swings.
Mm.
Yeah, which again, you know, it's also like depression feelings again when when the tide like swings back. It's like not just joyous and great feelings, it can also be depressive uh feelings, all of that. Yeah.
Absolutely. But I do think it does come easier to the exaltation and the domicile
Mm.
to be able to um, express what's happening inwardly than outwardly. But I think when we shift into the detriment and fall, that's where the struggle tends to occur with the moon being placed in those conditions.
Yeah. I mean, let's switch to them actually. I feel like that's a good segment into talking about them.
Yeah, absolutely. So, of course, we have the moon finding its detriment in Saturn ruled um, Capricorn, and Capricorn opposes Cancer, um, which is where the domicile is found. Um, so, uh, Saturn is this very restrictive, constricting, limiting, structured energy. So I think when the moon is placed here, there may be a tendency of a native with this placement to try and compartmentalize their feelings. Um, the instinct may not be to feel and process, but rather um, analyze or sort in my perception.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, but it's there's I think a lack of instinct to self nurture and self nourish here. The because Saturn can endure a lot.
Mhm.
It that's the planet that rules time. There is a longevity and an endurance associated here. Um, but I think when the moon is in detriment in Capricorn, there can be difficulty knowing how to actually meet certain needs. Sometimes there may even be a dismissal or a rejection of those needs, um, even being there, or of certain feelings even being there.
Yeah, I feel like there's something about the like objectivity of Capricorn and Saturn that just does not feel fit too well with the moon and its changeability.
Mm.
Um, because Saturn is like long-term things. And so these are like feelings that feel like very long, which is usually not the best feelings. And again, it's like something very subjective, but how many times have you or maybe somebody you know been in like, I don't know, a depressive state or something? It feels like eternity. You know, like,
Yes.
and that's interesting, like the time component, because there's something interesting about the moon and Saturn actually, that they both have this like cycle that is very similar, even though like on completely different ends. But the fact that like the moon takes like 28 days to get back to itself, and Saturn does too, just in years. It takes like 28 years to return
Mm.
back. So there's like something about their similarity, but just like the speed of that is different. And yeah, like that can be harsh, and it's usually these unpleasant feelings that feel like eternity. But again, that's just like a subjective feeling. That doesn't mean that's actually like that in reality. But feeling wise, it's still something that is experienced through us as like something like, gosh, how can I get out of this horrendous state? Yeah, yeah, it's interesting how like emotions really distort time, how we're experiencing them.
Yes. Well, I think a recent example of that phenomenon that everyone recently experienced was the isolation of the initial shutdown of the COVID-19
Yes.
pandemic. I think there was a collective time distortion that was felt after experiencing um, that level of solitude. And that I think is an excellent example of how that can be translated by someone who has a Saturnian moon in Capricorn.
Yeah, and the eclipses were in Cancer Capricorn at that time.
That's
Um,
right, because
I just remember, yeah.
they didn't move into Sag Gemini until
Yes. I mean, it moved like it started its shift in the summer of 2020, but like the eclipses around like January, December. I mean, I just remember them being super, super loud personally. That's why I have it
likewise.
in mind so exactly. But yeah, yeah, because right, they're opposites. So it means like when there's, um, like just to briefly talk about like new full moons, because that's like astrology 101, it's like even if you don't know astrology, you know what a new and a full moon is, because you see it. And so they're always happen in like the opposite pairs. Like if we have like the new moon always coincides with the sun conjoining the moon, like in the sign that the season is in right now, which is why we just had like the Cancer new moon, which means that the next moon, the full moon, is gonna be opposite that. It's gonna be in Capricorn, unless it's switched, because that sometimes also happens that we first have the full moon,
Yes.
and then the new moon, but generally it's all like in the season of Cancer, there's always going to be one new moon in Cancer and one full moon in Capricorn. Unless we have the exception of a blue moon, but
Yes,
we
yes,
can talk
occasional
about that a
blue,
bit later on. Yeah.
definitely.
So is there something more to add with like the detriment of Capricorn, or should we talk about?
Let's jump into Scorpio. Because here, whereas the exaltation of the moon in Taurus is very focused on what is comfortable and what is pleasurable, the moon in Scorpio tends to fixate on what hurts, what is uncomfortable. I often say that like being a Scorpio moon, there's a tendency to um, create a home in an uncomfortable place. If you have only ever known um, averse conditions, if that's what you're familiar with, you are more likely to continuously subject yourself to that. And Scorpio being traditionally ruled by Mars, there is a, a unique sort of endurance and willpower that I do think Moon Scorpio has access to. Um, However, it being fixed water instead of cardinal water like Cancer, um, I do think there is a tendency to fixate on perhaps traumatic or negative memories. Um, and that prevents the moon from kind of renewing itself or allowing the emotional shores to kind of self cleanse. I think that's something that as a Scorpio moon, you're more likely to have to intentionally cultivate that, because it doesn't come naturally. Being Mars ruled and being nocturnal, Scorpio is concerned with um, emotional self defense and ensuring that what once caused pain or hurt or conflict, it's like I have to remember this and fixate on it. So I'm staying vigilant and I won't allow that to happen again. So I don't experience that again. But that emotional fixation at the same time on preventing those experiences or attempting to prevent um, that feeling from being felt again, you still end up kind of continuously subjecting yourself to that. So yeah, the moon finds fall in Scorpio because it is not in Scorpio's nature to necessarily pursue pleasure or comfort because
it in its environment that it was likely subjected to, there may have been a sense of hypervigilance or needing to be defensive or be on guard of something. Um, Scorpio is also a secretive sign. It's associated with mystery and concealment. So I do find that a lot of the time, um, at least in my experience with my Scorpio moon, a lot of what I feel is hidden from even me, and I will often go out seeking it. I'll have to peel back um, the layers. Um, but then something else that I think when Scorpio is prone to is picking off the scab too soon, um, like never allowing a wound to heal, or letting something breathe for a little bit, because Mars is very action oriented, and Moon and Scorpio can struggle when they run up against a situation where it's like, oh, I can't actually do anything about this situation or about this feeling I'm experiencing. I simply have to be with it and allow it to pass. Um, that's something very difficult for Scorpio.
It certainly is. I was just thinking of like if Cancer Moon is good for crisis, Scorpio Moon is the crises. Like
Yes,
Scorpio is the crises. So every Scorpio moon needs a Cancer moon, I guess. Um, but also, yeah, in terms of like emotions, I always feel like, well, what's fixed emotions? What's emotions that are hard to like go through? And that for me is something like grief, is something like depression, is something like shame, like this icky feelings that just kind of like need a long time to process and they like keep staying there. Like it's not like usually a one-time thing and then good and done.
right.
Um, and so there's something that just naturally doesn't come to Scorpio about that. Because again, Scorpio is very it's like a watchdog almost, where
Mm,
like
yes,
carefully needs to scan the environment, which makes sense. The moon is the environment. So what does a very like hypervigilant moon do? Well, it's constantly scanning the environment for threats. Like what's gonna come in? Is this good? Is this safe? Is this not safe? Like understanding Scorpio, like if you understand why the moon is in fall in Scorpio, like you understand why Scorpio reacts the way it does so much better because it needs that. Like it needs that scanning of threat and safety constantly. Um, because yeah, like when that hurt comes, it's so hard to process. It takes so much for like a Scorpio moon, Scorpio in general, but just like to process something that's really painful and hurtful. Um, and it's also interesting if we put like the fall and exaltation side by side. Um, Taurus has no fallen planets, and Scorpio has no exaltated or no planets in exaltation there. Like
yes.
there's and it's interesting that it's the moon that is
Hmm.
doing its thing there. And I'm probably gonna screw this up the way I'm saying it right now. But it's something that I learned from like Adam when I was taking my astrology course, like year one in Hellenistic astrology. And it was something that Rhetorius said, or he rhetorically, pun intended, asked himself of like, why is there no fall in Taurus and no exaltation in Scorpio? And it's something of the lines of like, well, when somebody is like happy and in its joy, there's nothing that can like take that away from the person. But when somebody's depressed, there's nothing that can like uplift the person, like no matter what you do. It's not exactly like that, but something along the lines of that to just like understand like the exaltation full process with the moon here. But also Taurus and Scorpio as signs.
Yes, absolutely. And I think what you mentioned about an emotion that's difficult to move through, like grief, Scorpio moon at its best, attempting to overcome the fallen condition, harnessing the transformative nature of that sign, grief can actually become something that Scorpio moon is very good at moving through when it allows it to constantly evolve and change. But sometimes with things like that, with a Scorpio moon, there's a frustration in continuing to encounter the same feeling or the same situation. It's like, I thought I already defeated you. I thought I already fought this battle. What do you mean I have to do it again? Um, but again, Scorpio does not intuitively have that insight to the cyclical nature of the moon. Its home is Mars. It's mission oriented. It's like, I thought we already did this mission. So that, I think that is a good way to kind of illustrate the complication of Scorpio being there for the moon.
Yeah, there's like the intuitiveness of Scorpio is very much survivalistic, which is why
Yes.
Scorpios are very good at being like, oh yeah, don't go to that party today. Like it's dangerous.
Oh, completely.
Yeah, so is there anything else to add to the dignity scheme? I feel like we kind of went over it.
Yeah, I think just again highlighting the fact that it's all water and earth here,
Yes,
highlighting the nature of the moon being emotional as well as very rooted in the tangible and the physical realm. That's what I would say is like a big takeaway at looking at dignity with the moon.
for sure. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, there's nothing that I have to add to that. I'm just like looking at our notes, and our next point is connection to nighttime. And I'm wondering what what we wanted to say there, or is that also a segment to kind of talk a bit about like night charts and sect lights?
Yeah, let's go into that. Um, I am a night chart and I love it here, but I've always been a night owl, always been very lunar fixated even before I knew that the moon had anything to do with me specifically. Um, but yes, the moon gets to be the luminary of sect in night sect. Um, and if you have a night chart, the moon is the moon is that girl for you. Very, very important planet to track and develop a relationship with and to get to know very intimately in your own chart.
Yeah, and maybe just if like I'm not going to assume anyone's astrology level here. That's why I'm like, okay, maybe like hearing this for the first time, you're like, what the heck is a night chart? Um, so essentially, depending on where the sun is in compared to your rising or descendant, so if it's above that like horizon line of your ascendant or descendant, then you have a date chart. But if it's below that, it's gonna be a night chart. And technically, you could say that it's like if you're born during the night, you have a night chart, and if you're like just born during the day, you have a day chart. But it can sometimes be a bit tricky with the degrees.
Yes.
I have my sun just 1 degrees above my ascendant. So like that's this like tricky part. But like I was born at sunrise and I do very much through my experiences have experienced Mars as most definitely the bigger malefic in my
Yes.
life. So I'm like 100% have a day chart. But yes, you're just basically gonna like sect stands for as in kind of team,
Yes.
which just means like if you have a day chart, you're gonna have the sun in the form of luminary on your team and Saturn and Jupiter. Jupiter as your greater benefic and Saturn as your lesser malefic. And if you have a night chart, the moon is going to be the luminary of your sect, and Venus as the greater benefic, and Mars as a lesser malefic.
Yes.
So it's kind of like team players that we have here, depending on which team you are. And again, you could just like if you have a night chart, probably the moon's going to be a lot more prominent, or you're going to relate to it maybe a bit more. Obviously, it depends on other natal placements. I don't want to generalize here. But I would say, in a general way, that if you have a night chart, the moon is probably going to be like a planet you more deeply would relate to.
Yes, and maybe you would resonate more with the identity of the sign of the moon rather than your sun. Again, subjective from chart to chart, but I do also think it is interesting that the night sect is moon plus um, Venus and Mars, which are planets involved in the dignity schema of the moon as well.
Totally, totally. And there's also, I mean, the if we look at the thema mundi, which is I mean, sorry, that doesn't have so much to do with what you just said, but just like the thema mundi, which is the birth chart of the world, um, like the moon in Cancer is kind of like the first planet from that scheme onwards.
Yes.
That's what I wanted to add here. Um, is there something more to say about that? Or
Um, I guess if if you do have a night chart, or if you don't know what kind of chart you have, taking a look at it and discovering that you have a night chart versus a day chart, um, I think that lends itself to the Lunar principle of like, this isn't one size fits all, yeah, for astrology, but um, it definitely is different, and your energy, physical and otherwise, probably is reflected a little bit differently, um, if you're a night chart versus a day chart. I certainly find that to be true for myself.
yeah, and also if you're a Cancer rising, even if you
Yeah.
have a day chart, the moon's gonna be your ruling planet, and you're totally definitely gonna feel very deeply related to it.
Oh yeah, it's fully running the show for me. I mean, tracking the transits was of the moon and how it was affecting me on a granular level was incredibly integral to my understanding of how the moon works and how moon ruled people function because of
Mhm.
it.
Definitely. Yeah, we're gonna talk a bit later on about like establishing your relationship to the moon. And like that kind of definitely goes a bit into that, but let's not get too much ahead of ourselves first.
Yes, yes, much more to
Um,
talk about.
yes, much more to talk about. Let's talk a bit about like the joy of the moon in the third house, because I feel like that's something that when I first heard it back then, I was like, what do I make of that information? Um, because the third house and its meanings, especially in maybe more like modern astrology ways, you could say, are very like, how the heck is that related to the moon? Um,
Yes,
so, but if we go back to ancient times, and again, you probably know I did a house series, and like if you want to
yes,
listen to the third house, like there's a whole episode on the third house. But like the third house in ancient times was much more related to these like daily rituals that we do, and like the
yes.
the goddesses, like the shrines that we visit, because it was deeply
Hmm.
like if we think of these like smaller communities, because like in earlier times everything was a lot more communal and like village based, and
Yes, you
usually
had
when
your
you have your
clan or your
exactly.
tribe. There was, and different levels of that, like family, extended family, and then your greater community. And part of the third house ritual or third house places, you were likely a big part of your day was going to pay homage or go perform some act of worship or offering. And
Yes.
so the third house is the house of the temple, or of temple-like places, all of these daily pilgrimages
Mhm.
that we do. And I think people underestimate the importance of the moon in influencing our ability to cultivate habits and cultivate routines. But this is where that really begins, is here in the rejoicing house of the moon in the third.
Yes. And I feel like that, um, like just that ritualistic aspect, and because it was also, and I feel like that's where the like later interpretations of like neighborhoods, came in. Like one way to meet your family, your siblings, your neighbors was at the temple, like which you
Yes.
went to daily.
Or
Like
the
that was,
bathhouse.
yes, or the bathhouses, stuff where you met people from that village and that constituted like this connection.
Mhm.
And that's why it's also linked to like short distance travel because it's everything that was like in your like daily commute, nothing that's far away, which would be the ninth house, and why the sun
Right.
has its joy there, which would be something like a long pilgrimage up to that temple in the mountains.
Yes.
The moon is really local base and things you would do on a day-to-day basis. And this is really why the moon has its joy there. And also kind of like the ch in a way, again, as you said, it's interesting. It's not like it's like something you do every day, but there's still like room for adjustments. It's like, oh, well, do you have to visit the goddess every day at 10 a.m.? It's like, no, maybe you visit it 1 hour earlier or later. Or then you go to the bathhouse, or then you do this. And it's very like
Yes.
intuitive as well, because it can be because it is so nearby and you can kind of adjust it, probably like based on how you're feeling.
Exactly. Yes. It's all of those things that are done that make the structure of your day, of your life, so signature, um, to you. The third following the second, where we establish our sense of security and support. It's like in the second, we establish what our values are, what makes us feel valued. And the third house is where we actually go and translate that and enact that. Um, and, the types of relationships that are found in the third house, again, like you said, in modern astrology, that's conflated with like neighborhood and neighbors, but you might not necessarily know the names of your neighbors. Today, it's not a cultural expectation in the West to know your neighbors' names or even to talk to them, but whatever has that like very familiar type of rapport, and the third house having strong ties to speech and communication, and the written word, um, the relationships that are found in the third house, those are very personal because they've developed their own sort of language, their own sort of vernacular. This is where you and your friends, um, your catchphrases live, your inside jokes, like the unique greeting that you've developed between yourself and the person who delivers your mail, delivers your milk, the person at the corner store that you go to once or twice a day. Like, those are the type of things that fall here in the realm of the third house. And it's that this is mine, like this is my unique experience. That's why the moon has that rejoicing here. That's why it has that very personal quality.
I agree, yeah. Yeah, and there's um even thinking I'm going to talk about public transportation now.
Oh, please, yes.
But just because like before when I used to go to like specific types of work, like I always had to take the bus. And there's like if you take the same bus every day, there's a good chance that there are like the same people, not always, but like usually like a similar set of people that also take that bus every day.
Yeah.
And as you said, maybe like you don't talk to them, but there's something that just becomes familiar, and sometimes it even like has this funny ways where it's just like, oh, that person is always sitting on that seat. Like you just like know.
Yes,
Um,
exactly.
yeah. Yeah, and even if even if you're driving your car to work, there's something that becomes like just very familiar of taking that route,
Hmm.
and intuitive to the point where if something is off, is not the same, you would probably immediately notice it because it's like, why is, um, so yeah, there's definitely something about like familiarity with the moon and the third house and like these like short-term commutes and journeys that just works very, very well together. And why the moon has its joy there.
Yes, yeah. The third house is the cultivation of um personal ritual and habit, those idiosyncratic things that you do, like when you're going to make a cup of tea for yourself. Maybe there's a specific mug that you like to use. In fact, there probably is a specific mug that you like to use. Maybe you let the honey pour out of the jar for exactly 2 seconds. Maybe you have the habit of stirring it clockwise, or like saying an affirmation into your drink. Those are the type of things that live here in the third house.
Yeah, I'm just like thinking of Taurus being like, treat yourself.
Completely, yes.
Yeah, it's definitely like the beauty rituals. Everything you kind of do on a day-to-day basis. It's even if you think you're not doing rituals, that's the interesting part. You are doing rituals. Like, because
Yes.
even just waking up and brushing your teeth, there's a certain way you do that every day. And
Well,
that's
that's
like
that's
a
very
ritual.
lunar.
Yeah, that's
It's
very
like
lunar, exactly.
a lot of the personal rituals we have aren't even done consciously because they come
Yes.
so instinctively, we don't even think about it. Like, there's just, I don't necessarily want to say autopilot, but we're not analyzing the process of partaking in these rituals a lot of the time. We're just fully there and present in enhancing that experience that we have chosen to have as a part of our day.
Yes. Yeah, and it's like, why do we do them? Well, it's to like generate a feeling of feeling well and feeling safe and feeling whole. Um, so
Yeah.
it correlates so well to the moon, and also a lot of the, I guess the main like ritualistic parts we do on a day is like what do you do when you wake up and what do you do before you go to sleep? Which
Mhm.
corresponds to kind of both the luminaries is like what do you do when the sun is rising and what do you do when the sun is setting? Um,
Yes. A lot of
which
the
is yeah.
rituals that we have are, in part in pursuit of the maintenance of the body, of our health, because probably a lot of the daily pilgrimages you do, if you're not taking care of your spiritual health by going to the temple, by visiting your ancestral altar, whatever it may be for you, you're probably going to the grocery store, you're um, taking a shower, or you're bathing, or you're feeding yourself. All of these things associated with the maintenance of the physical body get to live here because they're lunar.
Yes. And then it's something like maybe you have the moon in Capricorn there. That's maybe going to be something that's exactly difficult for you. Or maybe you have Saturn in whatever sign there. Maybe that's going to be something that's exactly difficult for you, like in an experiential way of like your own birth chart.
Mm-hmm. Definitely.
Okay. Is there something more to say about that? Or
Um, just that, like, there's harmony that happens when a planet gets to be in that house that it rejoices in. Um, the planet is able to function with this, like, it's very liberated because it's supported, because there's a freedom there. There's an inherent compatibility
Mhm.
between the house and the planet. So if you have the moon in the third house, congratulations. Very, very beautiful. We love that for you.
Yeah, I know one person like off the bat that has it, and she loves to go on daily long walks, and that's
Mm,
so like third house.
perfect.
Perfect.
Excellent.
Yeah. It's like probably if you have the moon in the third, that's your daily self-care routine is like doing this daily small walks and things like that.
Absolutely. That's absolute medicine for you.
Yeah, so let's talk about something interesting here that is linked to the moon, definitely also kind of linked to Cancer, but of course it is because the moon is the home sign of Cancer. But I wanted to talk a bit more about like the moon's association with like the impulse towards nurturing and mothering and kind of like this connection to like home and safety. Um, and I guess a lot of what like a lot of people related to this feminine principle.
Mm.
Um, and then we're gonna do a bit of a twist here of like gendering the moon, but let's maybe first talk just about that first.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I definitely do think a major part of the relegation of um, motherhood and nurturing that the moon gets is because of its receptive nature. Um, and you know, as as time has passed and as cultures have dictated, the receptive role has often been relegated to the feminine. That's not inherent across the board. And of course, we all have that solar generative energy and lunar receptivity to it. But because the moon is receptive, it is able to listen. And when you are able to listen, you are going to pick up on not just what people want, but also what people need. So, a lot of people who do have strong moon or who are very lunar, that ends up being a quality that many of them possess, is the ability to not only listen to what people are saying, even if they're not verbatim communicating like I want or I need XYZ. It's like I can hear that this is what you are needing or what would feel supportive for you right now. And lunar people can become very good at intuiting and anticipating needs, not just of others, but for the self as well. It's like, oh, I'm starting to feel this way or behave this way. I guess that means it's time for me to give myself this or do this for myself.
Yeah, that's very true. That's not something that's in my toolbox. Doesn't come naturally to me. Um, and that's probably because my moon is in Gemini, right? There's the moon and Mercury are kind of not compatible in that way, where it's like more of a head heavy thing when it comes to Mercury and it's very good at analyzing. That kind
Yes.
of gets in the way with emotions, which are very irrational oftentimes, not always. But there's like always this urge of Gemini or just like Mercury then to be like, oh, but I need to know why I feel this way to then be able to feel this way or what at least that's how I experience it. Um, so it's something I'm definitely a bit jealous of. People that that comes more naturally. I'm always just like amazed. I'm like, wow, like how can you do that? Obviously
Yes.
like I have other tools I'm good at, but that's something that I feel like I can very much learn from like moon cancer heavy people. as somebody that just like really does not have any Cancer energy at all. Um, and yet it's still interesting that right now, which always happens when transits happen, we still get a bit of a feeling and sense of that. Like, I don't
Mhm.
have any Cancer energy in my chart, yet I'm still experiencing the new moon, Jupiter, Sun cazimi that just happened, which kind of gives me a bit of a glimpse into, oh, this is Cancer. Like, this is the
Mhm.
realm of the moon, and this is how it feels like. And for some people, that is a more like daily lived experience, if that's a natal placement. And for some, we just kind of get a glimpse of it during transits or different timing techniques, such as maybe moon progressions, which actually is also something interesting we could briefly touch upon now that I'm thinking about it.
Yeah.
Um, since, yeah, like, okay, let me say what the heck progressions are first. Basically, when you were born, you track the every day after your birth is like kind of one life year. And so since the moon moves fast, like it changes signs every 2.5 days, it means every like 2.5 years, the progressed moon would change into a different sign. That means throughout your life, you'll probably experience every progressed moon at least once. Which is
Yes.
interesting because it then gives us glimpses into, yeah, like how does the moon feel in different signs? Um, and so when the moon is like the progressed moon lands in the sign of Cancer, it's maybe also going to give us a better hold of how it does feel to actually have that toolkit at better display to like go through our emotions, I guess.
Yeah, I'm thinking back to when my progressed moon was in Cancer, and I think that's a period of time when I was in therapy and like just coming to terms with a lot of my needs that were going unmet that I hadn't acknowledged. So that was definitely a season of um, enhanced care and tending to the self and um, listening deeper to what was happening in my own mental and emotional realms. So thank you for bringing that up. That's actually such a good insight to make.
Yeah, yeah. And when you're 27, which means like both of us, I guess,
Yes,
um, is you experience your secondary progress lunar
lunar
return.
return.
So,
That's right.
so that is definitely also like a big highlight. And usually what happens is there's like a big homecoming type of energy. At least that's what it felt like for me, because like I had it exact a few months ago. Um, I feel like it was like
Mhm.
during Gemini season.
Likewise.
So it was very like, wow. Like I don't know, I just understood it like so much better. Um, so I feel like that's nice. And there's also like right there's 27 Club, which is interesting that there's a lot of artists that passed away when they were 27 when this was kind of going on. And I think a lot of them actually have had their moon in Cancer, if I'm not mistaken. I know Kurt Cobain
Yes.
had for sure.
That's correct. I can't remember Jimi Hendrix
I think so too,
moon.
but I don't want to.
I know he had Jupiter in Cancer.
Mhm.
So some lunar energy at play, but with the folks who to whom this phenomenon applies, a lot of them were thrust into this intense level of scrutiny and fame. So we can then say that their actual needs and actual desires were likely not being met, were being ignored and overridden because of the demands of their profession and the role that they were expected to play. So I think, when you reach that secondary progressed lunar return, in conjunction with the nodal reversal, which we can also get into when we talk about the
Yes.
nodes later, um, But I do think there is, you know, if you're experiencing extreme distress or being deprived of, you know, nourishment and support that you need, there's definitely a big uh, reckoning that can happen. Like it can arrive as a huge um, wake up call where something major must happen, or change. Otherwise, you know, you fall into uh, despair and have to turn to really, really extreme things to get some level of um, emotional support and relief and reprieve.
Yes. In my experience, meeting or reading charts for people that have Cancer moons that had a good, nourishing upbringing and relationship to their caregiver, which was mostly their mom, versus the ones that did not have that,
Mm,
very different. In my experience, it takes quite a big toll on Cancer moon people if they did not have that. Like more than it does to some other signs or placements. Yeah, because again, the moon is just linked so much to the environment and it can really
mm.
constitute of a big wound that like gets carried throughout life or then tries to, as you said, like maybe outsource it through other people or other things. Yeah.
Yeah, let's talk about how that the condition of the moon in the chart um, gives us that insight into the environment and what that environment is providing. You know, what are those impressions that it's casting for the moon? And you know, let's say we're looking at a moon that is placed in the third house. What does that tell us about that individual's environment that they grew up in?
Yeah, I mean there's probably lots of things to consider with like dignities and like in which like you know if the moon's in Sagittarius is going to be influenced by Jupiter. That's why astrology is so multifaceted, but like in a very basic way we could probably assume that there is something about like the environment that was very ritualistic. Sounds a bit stupid to say it like that. But something that constituted of some sort of like rhythm and like constancy.
Yes.
Um, and maybe also like a good support system, maybe somebody that grew up in like a
Mhm.
community.
I'm thinking of
Um,
the phrase, it takes a village
oh
to
yeah,
raise a child. And that
true,
feels like
true.
such a rejoicing moon type of adage. Um, I'm also thinking maybe people that grew up with a lot of other children their age around them, you know,
Hmm.
playmates, maybe growing up with siblings or
Yes.
cousins or friends that basically fulfilled that sibling type of role. That's what comes to mind for me.
Yeah. Yeah, no, for sure. There's definitely something in that regards. And so, okay, let's maybe talk about like a more difficult house, just to have like a
Yes.
comparison. Let's just put Moon in I don't know, the sixth or the 12th or something like that.
Yeah, no, the sixth, the eighth, and the 12th, those are the houses that um are not seen or perceived by the ascendant, aka the self. So if the moon has to lurk in one of those houses, it can definitely indicate the experience of growing up in an environment where one's needs or one's emotions are not being seen, not being tended to or prioritized um, by a caregiver. Particularly with Moon in the sixth, I think something that may get reinforced by a native's environment is that um, their emotions or their needs are imposing upon their caregivers or like it's an inconvenience for them to present their needs or present their feelings, because it's an interruption of the routine or of the system, that a caregiver or of that environment may have set in place. Um, so yeah, the sixth in particular, I think, very difficult place for the moon to be.
Yeah, because there's almost something that feels like you gotta work harder to like express or feel your feelings
Right.
or
It's
maybe
more
yeah.
it's more labor on your part, but also
Hmm.
I feel like maybe you're getting told by someone or some experience in your environment that like you as a person are a lot of work to deal with. You
Hmm.
are an inconvenience.
Yeah. Yeah, I can totally see that. Or that just like it's not valued so much. It's more like, oh, it's more important to like work and toughen up instead of like
Right.
feeling your feelings. Like, what is that?
Yes, work
Yeah.
through it, do XYZ instead, like go make yourself useful. That type of approach, I feel like um, can be something that's enforced by that environment if the moon is placed there.
Yeah, and it makes sense because the sixth is the joy of Mars, so obviously the moon is like, mm-mm.
Yeah, no. Mars is like, we don't have time for all of that. What are you talking about?
Exactly. Exactly. And then I don't know, should we do like another house? Like maybe let's do the seventh house because that's interesting because sometimes the seventh, especially if the moon is like right on the descendant, could
Mm,
sometimes even talk about like another person and not specifically you. And
yes.
like how the other, like your close one-on-one partner might be that one that exemplifies these traits of that moon that is there.
Definitely, yes. Maybe a moon in the seventh house or moon being on the descendant that can indicate being in a lot of close or intimate relationships with people who themselves are very lunar or who do have that very intuitive, emotionally intelligent quality to them. I think with moon in the seventh house, that tends to indicate a native who is very concerned with how other people feel, maybe taking it upon themselves to um, constantly figure out how people are feeling, um, which I do think a lot of seventh house moon individuals are very insightful in terms of interpreting behaviors and making sense of people's character. Um, However, this moon placement can also lead to um, a certain level of self abandonment because they're very focused on directing that lunar energy um, towards the other, which is what is represented by the seventh house, or towards the relationship, which is why it ends up, I think, being maybe a good thing sometimes for seventh house moon people to then end up attracting or being in a close relationship with someone who is lunar or maybe even is a cancer, because then that person can help them learn how to um, better support their own needs, and amplify that as being something to focus on, instead of constantly trying to figure out where other people are at, instead of having that attention be focused on their own emotional domain. A lot of that energy, especially mental energy, is being spent thinking about other people and how other people are feeling, or like, how can I make this person feel supported? How can I nurture and nourish them?
For sure. Yes. And as in like environment, again, I'm thinking maybe there was somebody that was like extremely important as like a caretaker role that it depends obviously also on the moon's condition. You know, having a difficult, like maybe having a Capricorn moon right under the ascendant might actually just be the
Mm,
opposite, where it's like, oh, like you had a caretaker that was very closed off to you.
yes.
But maybe having I don't know, Taurus moon right under the ascendant might be the other one. Like, oh, you had a very nurturing caregiver that like really gave a lot to you. So again, it obviously also depends a lot on the condition of the moon as always. And yeah, that's why birth charts are always so fascinating because then like a real story starts happening instead of just like
Yes,
talking things one on one.
absolutely. It is really interesting to see what the moon's placement tells us about how a person feels, emotionally safe or comforted, like how does that person get back to feeling centered and feeling safe, whatever house and whatever sign it may be in can illustrate to us like what sort of activities and what sort of places and people make that person feel really at ease and help them lower their guard so they're able to express themselves and share what is happening on the inside.
I agree, yeah. I can just say as a natal moon in the eighth, um, yeah, it does not come natural to me. Um, if it's interesting, I feel like with Jupiter traveling through Gemini, through my eight, actually made me aware how much I am
Mm,
hiding emotions, not even necessarily in a way because I like want to, but just because I felt safer to do so. But at the same time, how much like the stress that like that's actually like a big core of maybe why I am feeling so anxious is because I'm not even telling people what's going on right now. Like I'm just keeping it to myself.
yes.
So that's interesting. Yeah. Yeah, the moon's super interesting and how it gives us insight into these things and can also again help us to realize, okay, like what do I kind of need to yeah, what you said. I don't need to like reiterate it. Just what brings us like safety and how to express ourselves.
Yeah, and also where we find a sense of belonging, a sense of found family a lot of the time. Like for me, with Moon in the fifth house, I found family for the most part ends up being people that share a lot of the same interests and hobbies. Very very creative, very playful people, a lot of big personalities for sure. Like that tends to be the makeup of what comprises the community of belonging that I have found.
Yeah, I'm just like wondering what to say in my case. I guess I'm like with all the weird esoteric people.
Yes, you're with all the witchy baddies.
hmm No, but for sure, I feel like I have to have like I relate best to people that did kind of go through some things, like you know what I
Hmm.
mean? Like that can kind of understand like the stress of of life, I guess. Um I get very well along with these types of people, so that's interesting, yeah.
Yeah, people who have that familiarity with their own darkness or who have
True, yeah.
undergone significant life transformations.
hmm Okay, everyone, we are back from a quick break, and now we're going to talk about a bit more in depth about the moon governing over the body and what that kind of means, also from a medical astrology type of perspective, because the moon actually can give us a lot of insight into maybe what sort of like constitutions we have, or exemplify or look like, because like the moon just rules like over the body. So like the whole body. Um and like depending on where you have your moon, it can kind of give us insight into maybe like your bodily proportions, or again, just like your constitution. Like I would say for me, like the moon in Gemini gives me this like kind of very like airy, slim constitution. I feel like that's like very visible in my chart in that regard. And it's also something I learned from like taking that like 1 year course on it was more like herbal astrology, but there was a lot of like medical astrology involved in that. And yeah, it's interesting like what we can see there. And sometimes even also transit wise, like or problematic areas of like maybe potential like disease potential or illness potential.
Yes, definitely. Um, one person that I'm thinking of has a Pisces moon, and she has very bad feet,
Mm,
and ankles. So she regularly visits a podiatrist and like has special like shoe inserts to help support the arches of her feet. So that's one like very automatic connection that I'm thinking of, that's just like very literal in terms of the placement of the moon and its associations to a specific part of the body, Pisces being associated with the
hmm
feet.
hmm hmm Yeah, of course, the zodiac signs are ruling over different parts of the body then. And again, as you said, it could give us insight, like depending on where the moon is, it could give us insight into maybe a problematic area of that matter. Yeah, and of course, like maybe if the moon is like in whatever house it is, obviously the sixth house itself is much more linked to diseases and things like that. So maybe a moon in the sixth ha house, just in general, no matter what the sign is, might struggle a bit more with going through diseases or illnesses and things like
Right.
that.
Maybe
Yeah.
indicating a chronic illness of sorts, or a chronic um, condition
Mhm.
that one deals with. Um, for me, having my moon in the fifth, most of my health problems stem from a tendency to overindulge or over imbibe. That's usually where I run into health problems. Um, yeah, I think Scorpio moon again, being a discomforted, disquieted
Yeah.
moon. I do think Scorpio moons, potentially Capricorn moon as well, but speaking from my own experience, I think some of us may have the tendency to self-medicate with substances. And definitely in the past, when that tended to be my main coping mechanism, um, I would I would feel very terribly physically afterward, and like using continuously as a means of emotional management ended up creating a whole lot of other issues,
Mhm.
particularly digestive for me, also some skin flare ups and issues that I experienced during that. Um, Definitely affected my like endurance and my ability to perform certain tasks. So I think that has to do with that Mars connection of Scorpio there, and my Mars natally is placed in the sixth house. So
Mhm.
definitely the structure of my daily life got very altered, when I would do those things and when I would have those effects. Um, so that's one expression of that.
It is, yeah. Yeah, and I'm sorry you had to go through that. Um, yeah, I was also thinking my case, m- I struggled a lot with like anxiety issues, which just feels so like a mercurial moon in the eighth.
Yes.
And like something that's so, I mean, anxiety is, it's like the moment feels threatening, like you don't know, like it's very confusing. So there's that, like there's definitely there. And I what when you were saying that, it got me thinking into like how our diseases kind of formed, and it's like a false way of processing or not processing things, which would be ease. Well, this ease is the opposite. It's the non-processing of an emotion or a feeling or something. Like it's not in motion. It's like stuck inside the body. And if
Yes.
this is done for a long enough time, it becomes an illness, like it becomes a dis-ease.
Mm, completely.
Yeah, and usually a lot of the healing process involves like f feeling these things that got suppressed at some point in time.
Yeah, no, that's a really excellent point. I would say for some of my more longer term health issues that I experienced, I can definitely say that that was directly tied to like a significant emotional blockage that I had to work through. And I think once there was a certain breakthrough that happened, that was when I started to see a physical alleviation of those manifestations of these emotional things that I had been retaining for a very long time.
Yes. Yeah, I feel like that's almost like a whole podcast episode in and of itself. Because
It
there's like,
really could be. Oh my
yeah, there's like
gosh.
so much to be said about that. Also like from my experience, there's it's just like I cannot ignore the component of that, you know? There's just something so linked to like the expression of these suppressed emotions that just like like is part of that healing process. It's not the only part, but it's a very, very big and major part. And then sometimes also some other things that need to um, happen, which I also had to realize. I mean, talking about cancer, a big process for me during Mars in Cancer was me getting my like womb surgery, which was because of
Yes.
endometriosis, and that's something that I was processing emotionally for years, thinking like I have to do it, like I have to do that, and then like, once I heal that, it goes it goes away. But I feel like it was so deeply anchored that there needed to be something more like like literally cutting it away
Yeah.
to like do the full thing, and yet I can still say that doing all the work before that helped the operation to be like that final ritual of like now we're
Mm,
like finalizing that. I don't know what would have happened if I like just went and got the surgery immediately without doing all the things. Yeah, but again, that's like a whole episode. I feel like in and of itself, maybe, but I really,
yes.
yeah, I feel like for the most, we just wanted to give you guys like an overview of just how much the moon governs over the body and our ease or dis-ease potentials and constitutions.
Yeah, no, it's a very interesting component to look at. I'm trying to think of other people I know who have like such a like very, very visible or intuitive connection of a health condition that they've experienced and something that they were going through emotionally. Um, Actually, my brother, who is a Cancer moon, he has been in like a really big season of change, and he's a Cancer Jupiter as well, so he's about to
Mhm.
go through that Jupiter return. Um, and he'd been dealing with some pretty serious digestive issues
Mm.
for basically all of this year while Mars was retrograde in Cancer, and only very recently he found a treatment that has been working for him, but that also coincided with him beginning to navigate sobriety.
Mm.
Um, so just the crossover of that and the emotional work and contemplation that one has to do, I think, to make that conscious decision in pursuit of holistic health. But yeah, that's one expression from someone close to me that you know obviously felt very strongly with him being a Cancer moon and
Hmm.
Jupiter.
Definitely. I think Cancer in general also rules over that like stomach area.
Mm-hmm.
And it makes sense that I'm not sure if it rules over the gut, but I wouldn't be surprised if it does, since like the gut is our second brain. And it's
Yeah,
where so much of our emotions can get stored, or how also a lot of like eating disorders develop, or nervous system
yes.
disorders, and all of these things stem
Well,
from
and
like
how people say,
emotions.
yeah, and how it's said that you shouldn't eat if you're upset, or when you get
Mhm.
upset, it's like I've lost my appetite. Um, Definitely very, very lunar, very Cancerian.
Absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, um I struggled a long time with like a stress kind of I wouldn't say eating disorder, but just like it made me eat disorderly. Like that's a better way to put it.
Yes,
Where I
I've
just
experienced the same.
yeah, where I just like it's very weird to explain. I really like can see that in like the moon in the eighth of just when I got anxious, I felt like I'm gonna fall unconscious. And so I felt like in that moment I needed to eat to like prevent that for some reason. And
Mm.
so becoming hungry, experiencing hunger started to become very threatening to my nervous system. Um,
Oh, because you
yeah.
thought it was like a portent of that other health thing. Okay, yes,
Exactly.
I
Yeah. So
see
it's like it's
exactly.
a bit weird in that way. And so I actually started weirdly like binging all the time because of that.
Mm.
And like I had to always have like something with me. Which is the reason why I can't really eat bananas anymore because they just like still make me think like I always just ate bananas when that was happening. But it made me never fully like my point is it was the same dysfunction of binge eating, which is the fear of experiencing the moment,
Mm.
which is not me going to be unconscious. I it was just threatening to like go through that. And so a lot of
Yes.
like kind of healing that was like allowing myself to feel that first in spaces where I felt safe, which was like the home, and then gradually like also outside and in other places. Sometimes it still shows up, but now I'm much better able to like regulate it. And I did also end up having to go on like a complete like gut cleanse, if that's the right word. I don't know, but
Sure.
just like to really like I didn't like I heard it all the time. And yet somehow I didn't make the connection that that could also be an issue in my life, or like that my gut got so damaged because of that like stress eating.
Yeah.
But that like significantly improved like my emotional well-being. I was surprised, and therefore actually also helped some of the like endometriosis symptoms, which were like also all here in my stomach area. So
Yeah.
yeah, that's
Wow.
interesting.
No, that is really cool. I'm glad that you were able to overcome that, because yeah, what an interesting demonstration of that mind body connection.
Mhm.
Um, I do think that like an excellent way to remediate one's relationship with the moon is to remediate one's relationship with food. I do think those are very intrinsically connected, and I'm
Mhm.
thinking back to a time in my life when I was like going through just extreme instability and emotional distress, and just being at that base level of I have no idea how to overcome this and like get myself to a position where I am okay. So the first thing that I started doing, that I made a commitment to do, because I couldn't think of literally anything else, was I decided to start eating breakfast again, which was probably something at the time that I hadn't regularly done for about 4 years, which not
Mm-hmm.
good.
Yeah.
Definitely disordered eating. But I made a commitment to eat breakfast every day and go to the gym every day. And in doing that, in making that commitment to myself and my health, absolutely transformed like not only how I was feeling physically, but I was perceiving myself in a more compassionate light. I felt better about myself, and because I was able to address just like a very basic baseline need that had to be met for my body, it
Mm-hmm.
made some of my more complex emotional needs and feelings feel a lot more um, approachable. So I don't know if that's like fully Cancerian, or if there's like some element of having a Mars ruled moon coming into play there. But that was definitely one experience where I felt, before I knew it was a form of lunar remediation doing that, I definitely very quickly felt the effects of making that change.
Mm. Yeah, I feel that. And also, yeah, you made me think of food and how there's something so, I mean, food is so, I mean, first of all, it's a basic need.
Yes, but
Like there's,
food is
yeah.
also a third house thing. There's so many
True, true.
intimate rituals around food, and there's a lot of spiritual components to food as well. Food being left um, as offerings,
Yes, true.
continuing to pass down ancestral recipes as a form of veneration too. um, Food is extremely lunar.
Yes. Yeah, and it's also like so intimate, like the way you
Oh my
eat.
god,
And again, also very much
yes,
shaped by your environment, by your culture. And
completely.
yeah, and so like deeply embedded in us. Um, and as you said, yeah, true, it's such a ritualistic thing. There's so many foods, and in this particular case, I'm thinking of a lot of Asian countries. They have this very embedded in their culture of like eating together, and there's so
Yes.
many dishes. Like, be it that grill in the middle or like hot pot, where you like sit
Mhm.
around and gather and like you eat food together in like this
Yeah, and it's
ritualistic way.
family style.
Yeah, it's family, it's nurturance.
Hmm.
Yeah, and food is also something that I guess, our first food as a baby is our mother's milk, which is again like, oh, why is the moon exalted in Taurus?
Yes.
There's something about that like component of like milk and the bull is like, that's what we associate when we think of milk, I would say,
Yeah.
um, of this like quality of like life. And it's
Mm.
something that we can't like we are dependent on others to give that to us. Same as when we're old. I mean, maybe not everyone, but certainly if you experience an older age, might be something that you have to get dependent on again, somebody to feed you. So yeah, wow,
Ooh,
like food is
yes.
so very lunar.
Yeah, no, our journey with food, and as you just described, how it
Unexpectedly,
kind of
but yeah.
it comes full circle, how we encounter that cycle with food in our life. That in and of itself is very lunar. So thank you for pointing that out.
Yeah, I mean, thank you too. I feel like we both just like, yeah, it was unexpected, but I love the direction it went. Um,
Yes, I mean it's one of my favorite ways to express my love for someone as well as my
Mm,
hospitality
mm,
when someone is in my home. Like, I mean, I feel like that's a very cross-cultural phenomenon of like, if you're in my home, I'm going to feed you. i'm
yes,
I'm going to offer
100%.
you libation. I'm going to offer you to share a meal with me.
Mm,
And that
mhm.
meal is going to be cooked with, you know, with ritual, with love, with intention. I'm going to take my time with it. I'm going to present it to you maybe in a special dish. Like, it's going to be laid out in a very beautiful way, you know. And I think that's demonstrative of the moon being exalted in the Venusian Taurus. Of course, it's
Yes.
like enhancing that sensual experience of um, just taking care of a basic need, but elevating it and having a, you know, this connotation of like deepening or just honoring an existing relationship.
Mm. Yeah, I think of like the Venusian component of it is like food can kind of just be food, you know? And it can be like this meal you cook in 5 minutes and eat. But that component of like beautifying it is not necessarily, but the way that it enhances an experience is like that's why the moon is exalted in Taurus. Like, you know, the
Yes,
pleasure of like seeing something visually beautiful. Um, I don't know if we just say that in German or if that's also something you say in English of like the eye also eats the dish. I think it's something you
yes,
but so that's there as well. And that's definitely like tourist temple of like you don't need to beautify the dish, but like why not? Like it makes it so much more pleasurable and enjoyable. I certainly do that. Like even if I just eat my
oh,
own
me too.
food, I like just putting a few nice edible flowers and some, I don't know, like hemp seeds or whatever, and just like simple things, and it already makes it so much more enjoyable.
I'll take the time to do a little garnish, you know. And maybe this comes from like working in the restaurant industry, but even if it's just
I
me
get
who's
that.
eating the plate, you know, I'm gonna take the cloth and I'm gonna wipe the wipe the like excess away so it just is pristine on the dish. And maybe it's the fact that I have my moon and my Venus in the same sign of Scorpio and in the same house as well. But there are times where if I feel like I don't have the energy or if I don't want to make the effort or if I don't have the time to make a meal look beautiful or enhance it in a certain way, I'm like, I don't even want to do it anymore. Maybe I'll just go get something to eat instead. Like it's it is such a deeply personal thing that I find that I really like to ritualize whether I'm alone or if I'm sharing someone's company.
Yeah, I love that. There should be like a whole separate episode on like food and
Oh
and
yeah,
the
we could
zodiacs.
go even deeper, but yeah, thank you for reintroducing
Great.
the topic
Totally.
of the physical connection.
Yeah, it almost makes me feel like the next point we want to talk about feels like so off from everything we just said, which is kind of like the moon, like ruling over the realm of fate and fortune. Yeah, it kind of feels a bit out of place, but I guess we're gonna roll with it. Um,
Yes.
it's gonna come together in some way. Which ruling over the realm of fate and fortune means ruling kind of over the earthly realm. Because this is the realm of fate and fortune. As long as we are incarnate in our bodies, we are in the realm of fate and fortune. And fate and fortune really doesn't even mean necessarily like something good or something bad. It's just something that's constantly ebbing and flowing, which again makes so much sense with the significations of the moon. And gonna make even more sense when we're gonna talk about the nodes of the moon. Um, and so, interestingly enough, also literally going into Chaldean order, Ancient astrologers really believe that when we like came into Earth and we were born, and when we died to Earth, the moon is like the first or the last planetary body that the soul would go through. Which is
Mm.
also why it's so deeply linked to like what is kind of happening here. And also again our bodies. So yeah, and then we also have like the lots, which also known as the Arabic parts
Yes.
in our charts. And there's a lot that is like that we calculate based on the moon, and that lot is also known as a lot of fortune. So again, something that can give us insight into like how we experience maybe certain sort of like fated events. And with that, I don't mean necessarily something pleasant or unpleasant or positive or negative, just something that is fated, which is really how
Mhm.
people used to look at it. Also, fortune, it was really like more of like the wheel of fortune, something that is constantly turning and is changeable
Yes.
and mutable.
Yeah.
The Wheel of Fortune itself has that same shape of the moon, and like you said, it
Yes,
being
true.
this cyclical, ever evolving thing. Your luck is always going to change, your fortune is always going to change, and that is the same promise that the lunar principle holds. Though the only constant is change.
Yeah. Yeah, totally. I'm also thinking of this quote again. I'm sorry. I know so many quotes. I constantly forget who said them. Um, but something along the lines of like we never really know if an event is fortune or unfortunate. We only ever know our ever-changing thoughts to ever-changing events. And I think it's based on that like story of that farmer or something like that. Where like he had an accident and like everybody was like, oh no, like poor him, like now he can't do some things. But then like they had a call to go to the army, but then he couldn't go because he was disabled. And then everyone was, oh, you're so lucky your son doesn't have to. So it's like we never really know if
Mm.
something that happened in our lives is fortunate or unfortunate in the long run. And also, oftentimes, it could change depending on the circumstances. And that's really the moon, like doing its work there. And also the Wheel of Fortune itself, like kind of ebbing and flowing.
Yeah, no, that's a good point to make. Thank you for that. Um, I'll be honest, I don't personally work super closely with the law of fortune yet. I feel like that is an aspect of astrology that I'm still kind of warming up to, but I would love to hear you elaborate more on it.
I mean, I wouldn't consider myself a pro either. I guess I just got so interested in it because it's literally like conjunct my moon. So I'm like, okay,
Oh, sure, yeah.
like a lot of fortune right conjunct my moon. So I'm like, there's something interesting going on there. Um, and I think from like an experiential level, it's kind of like what I said before. It just seems like things that kind of have to happen in life. If they're
Mhm.
pleasant or unpleasant, I'm sure there's many, like Jupiter, for example, last year, when it was going over that, actually coincided with me having a pretty terrible, like triggering flashback, trauma, panic attack, mixture of everything.
Mm.
But which then actually led to like a better diagnosis and better like treatment solutions or whatever. Um,
Mm.
so it's like, yeah, it was freaking unpleasant going through that. And at the same time, it also led to so many good things. It's also like Jupiter, like a benefic planet traveling through an
Yeah,
place. But it feels like something that kind of like had to happen. But it wasn't necessarily like the most pleasant thing to go through. So it's really, I really urge people to think of fortune not in the way of something positive or
yeah,
just positive, more something that is just fluctuating constantly.
not inherently good fortune. Um, but yeah,
Exactly, just fortune.
yeah, but what you said about it being so connected to the moon and your personal testimony that you just shared, it makes sense that some of the activations of the part where the law of fortune having to do with health and the physical body,
Mhm. Yes.
a lot of the time, not just things about career or
Yes.
about money.
Yeah, that is very true. And I think actually with that, we can very well go into like talking about the nodes because
Yes.
they are like almost the same thing, but like same but different way because the nodes of the moon are interesting because they don't like physically exist out there. They're mathematical points in the air um,
Yes.
that are kind of like the northest point and the southest point, and depending on where the moon is going with its like up and down notion, if it's going over that ecliptic line, this
Mhm.
is how the eclipses are formed. And they're always formed where the nodes of the moon are currently at. So basically, the nodes of the moon and the eclipses very much interlinked. Something to note if that's something you haven't noticed yet or whatever.
Yes.
And it kind of pushes that notion again of like fortune is something that goes up and down, and also why the nodes itself, I mean, the north node having to do with increase and the south node having to do with decrease. And again, something that is not necessarily good, not necessarily evil in either
Yeah,
ways.
completely.
Yeah.
Increase is not always good. Decrease
Yes.
is not always bad. And it's the nodes are really interesting because they are basically this spectrum of the moon, which is already a spectrum,
Yeah.
so it's like
Totally.
they demonstrate even further extremes that lunar energy can take, because the nodes being on complete opposite points of the moon's ellipsis, um, they can be very, very intense and destabilizing when they get to interact with other planetary bodies, and of course when they're activated through eclipses too. Um, but yeah, I do think some of the modern day misconceptions of the moon and of lunar energy therefore also contribute to the same misinterpretations of what the nodes are or what your nodal axis in your chart is. And can I just say, it is straight up North Node slash Rahulian propaganda that there's the conception in pop astrology that, like, oh, you have to do more of your North Node, you have to move towards your North Node. It's like, that's what that bitch wants you to think.
Yeah. Yeah. I fully agree. I feel like it's so interesting that it almost feels like um the rise of capitalism initiated that view of the nodes, and which
Yes.
is like our obsession with constantly focusing on increase and again going to that Rahu principle of like it's about gain and like kind of almost being like trapped in the material realms because you're blinded
Totally.
by the gain aspect of it. And so I feel like it's now I at least feel like it's very dangerous just telling people like go
Oh my
there. Like
God.
that's what you have to achieve in this life because it's like
Yes.
that's already like what we're struggling with.
Right. And at the same with the same token, it's like I think the push to move away from the South Node is indicative of like maybe a lack of discipline or a lack of spiritual connection that is
Yeah.
present in Western culture in particular. So it is interesting to see, like you said, how capitalism has shaped those narratives emerging around the nodal axis. Um, but I love focusing in on the nodes, both what is happening on the collective level as they transit, um, but also just looking at people's individual astrology and their experience of their particular nodal axis and the interplay that it has with their own moon sign and placement.
Yeah, and I mean the eclipses are just always so loud. I feel like,
Oh,
and the eclipses are
every
again
time.
something that even if you don't know astrology, you sh heard about that. Like there's so many people that even if there's like an eclipse that you can observe, go out of their way to make to like see that, even if they don't even care
Yes.
about astrology. So the moon's quite impactful at luring people in. Like people don't do that with the sun, even though obviously the sun is at play when the eclipses happen. But
Yes. Yes. I know I'm remembering, what was it? I think it was last April. My Aries friend had the solar eclipse fall on her birthday, and it was visible from where
Mhm,
we were.
mhm.
And we were just out and about running some errands to get ready for her party that she was having. And because we'd been looking forward to this, we had already had our eclipse classes for some time, but people were coming out in droves to the grocery store, people just on their lunch break wanting to get a glimpse of this phenomenon, people who are probably, for the most part, otherwise completely disinterested
Yeah.
in the cosmic movement of the planets. But it is extremely compelling. And I think, especially with the moon being involved, because the moon does represent the people.
Yes.
Um, so that's something interesting as well.
Yeah, and I think the moon is again something that even like people that kind of are like about astrology, usually like if the full moon comes along, they're like, like it's interesting that something happened around the full moon. Like it makes
Yes.
them start suspecting things. So it's interesting how the moon usually is that first bridge to noticing patterns of like what's happening out there is kind of happening down
Yeah,
here.
absolutely. I do think the moon brings people into that pattern recognition that comes when you start paying attention to what is astrologically happening.
Yeah, and as a former nurse, I can attest to the fact that,
I was
and so
literally just
many,
gonna bring that up about
yeah,
that this just common knowledge in both the healthcare industry and
yes,
also in the restaurant industry that like shit gets weird
yeah,
on the full
it
moon.
does. It seriously does. Like it just, um, I mean,
More
I worked in
accidents,
the,
more
yeah,
violence, I'm
yeah, yeah,
sure.
absolutely. I worked in the psychiatry, so I didn't work at like ER or something, but even there, like, there's so much more people that got like involuntarily delivered during the full moons.
Yes.
Um, and eclipses especially.
Hmm.
So yeah, because it's already usually like more sensitive people, right? And
Yes,
which actually, good point. We didn't write that down, but like the name lunatic comes from Luna. Like it has Luna in the name.
exactly.
And it's like the
Yes.
moon brings up heightened emotions. It kind of makes us go a bit crazy, especially if maybe we don't know how to handle emotions. And actually, interestingly enough, like thinking about like the cycles of the moon, because we haven't like we talked about like eclipses, but we didn't talk so much about like just the general new and full moon. Which like if let's just take this example right now. The Cancer new moon happened. It's like a seeding moment. So it's going to be interesting what kind of happens half a year later when we have the full moon in the sign of Cancer in December, because probably maybe something that started around this time might be like
Yes.
developing and hitting its peak point then.
Hmm.
And that's like what people kind of yeah, like I just like notice that sometimes in people's life or friends, like I'm obviously not imposing what they should or should not do in life, but like just seeing how like maybe they did something or like started something that was maybe a bit stupid during a new moon and like just seeing it like backfire half a year later, and just
Oh,
like
yes.
observing that, you know? And so I feel like in my life, that's definitely something that was like the first thing that made me notice, like, ooh, there's patterns up there. Like there's something happening.
Definitely. And just the how it is so consistently a revisitation of
Yeah.
the same themes, if not the exact same
Yeah.
situations or characters involved in those things.
Totally. I actually th feel like if we don't have anything else to add to any of the kind of points we were trying to make, I feel like this might be a good time to like start talking about how to build a relationship to the
I
moon.
agree. Yes, let's transition into
Okay,
that.
cool. So, well, one of that is kind of what we already mentioned, is just like observing the new and full moons. That's something that helped me so much. And let me literally like kind of pull out the book, which was my starter's book into getting into astrology more deeply.
Yes.
Moonology by Yasmin Bolan. I still feel like it's a great like beginner friendly book um to get into. I just generally feel like observing the moon is such a good way to get into astrology because you're
Yes.
gonna go through all the signs depending on the new and full moons and it will give you
Mhm.
insight. So it's, in
And
my
because it
opinion,
moves the
yeah.
fastest, you get a
Yeah,
lot of experience
that's
within
that's
just a
true, yeah.
year, within just a few months, getting to observe the moon in all of its signs and
Yes.
what that looks like for you transiting all of your houses. So it honestly, tracking the moon and what it's doing is a great crash course into familiarizing yourself with I think certain astrological energies, if not just the energy of the moon and how that may personally affect you. And I did want to say, besides consciously experiencing the new and full moons, to also pay attention to your lunar return whenever that comes around,
Yes.
as well as your lunar opposition, because I have found that that tends to be like my personal new moon or my personal
Oh,
full
interesting, yeah.
moon. Um, stuff tends to happen around those times that makes a lot of sense with what tends to be occurring in my life and what is being renewed and what is coming to like a culmination
Mm.
or a point of fullness for me. So definitely highly recommend paying attention to all of that.
Yeah, and especially if the moon comes around to your natal moon. So if you're, I don't know, like a
Yes.
Sag moon, like look out for that new moon and that full moon that happens in Sag because it's gonna feel a lot more personal to you.
Yes. And if you've already been doing that, maybe then you can start to pay attention to when planets cross over your
Mm.
natal moon,
Yeah.
or start touching on the planet that rules your moon, things like that. Depending on where you're at, you can start adding some additional technical elements to that experience of tracking those transits that are lunar in quality.
Yes, I feel like a very basic practice is just talking to the moon. Like just sitting
Yes,
down and talking to the moon because it's so easy
probably
to talk
one
to.
of my favorite rituals is to go outside and smoke and just look at the moon. And even after I finish smoking, I'll just hang out there, just hang out there for a little while. It's and it's maybe this is because I'm a Cancer rising that has a night chart, but that is my version of like sunbathing. And I imagine what happens to plants when they photosynthesize. I think that's
Yeah.
happening for me when I get to stand under the moon. I really do.
I love that. Yeah. Yeah, it's um I haven't done that in a while, I must admit, but there was like a period in my life where I was like regularly going out and talking to the moon, and I would not be surprised if it actually was during my profection year where the moon was my ruler, which is another timing technique that is interesting and like if it happens to fall like soon, the best way to get into like a relationship with the moon because it's going to be super prominent And you're going to feel like all the eclipses and all that stuff probably more intensely that year. Um, but the moon is like out of all the planets, I'm like, it's the best one to like tell your secrets to.
Oh,
I like that
absolutely.
personal stuff you wouldn't share, I guess wouldn't share with the other planets. Like other planets are for other things to go to, but if you want to somebody to just keep your secrets and witness you,
Mm,
like the moon is so good at witnessing because it's yeah, it just feels like it's up there. And
absolutely.
and again, it's like that nighttime, which gives that feel of like, oh, I can share things that I wouldn't in the daytime. Um,
Hmm.
it's really lovely and yeah, processing your emotions in that way. Yeah, and you know, we haven't talked about this before. I think you wrote it down somewhere of how this is a female thing, but like how our cycles are linked so much to the moon.
Yes, absolutely. Figuring out like if you are someone who menstruates, figuring out when you bleed, what sign the moon is in that tends to happen with for you, or what phase of the moon, and developing a conscious relationship with that, engaging mindfully with um, your cycle. And, if you want to do a little two for one, if you're someone who has a menstrual cycle, um, having your eating habits and what you're eating
Oh yeah.
reflect the things that you need during your follicular versus ovulation, et cetera, et cetera. I've started doing that, and honestly, I love it. It has helped, and I do think it's an additional way to um, ritualize something that I already do. Um, but back to the point that we were making earlier about food being a very lunar thing, building a relationship with the moon through the way that you cook your food, eat your food, share a meal. If you're someone who maybe doesn't tend to put a lot of thought in what you may be cooking, maybe you can try to like try some new recipes. Maybe you can ask a family member or an elder for something to try. I think that's a great way to work with the moon to honor something that has nourished people in your lineage or nourished people close to you for like years and years and years. Like there's, I
Mm,
think, a very special magical quality to that.
I agree, yeah. And I actually even believe I couldn't tell you exactly where this is from, but I just heard that it's bad luck or you shouldn't eat food that you cooked pre-eclipse after the eclipse. Um,
Oh,
so there's something
interesting.
interesting there too.
I'm like, have I done that before?
Yeah,
Wait,
like don't
hold
worry.
on.
I definitely have done that. But I have since I heard that, I got a bit more cautious,
Vigilant. Yes.
vigilant. Yeah, because I feel like the notion of that is just like because eclipses are major beginnings and endings. So it's I feel like the notion of don't take something from like pre that into that new chapter like
Yes.
very briefly. And I really don't want to scare anyone like feeling like oh gosh I had bad luck because I ate something I cooked before the eclipse after the eclipse. But now you know so you can maybe
Yes.
do it more cautiously.
Now you know. Couple other things I think people could do if you want to build a relationship to the moon. Um, Doing something intentionally lunar or self-care, self-maintenance, emotional regulation oriented, either on the moon's day, which is Monday, or during the
Yes.
moon's hour. There are plenty of planetary hour websites and apps that you can take a look at to track those things. Um, but just like intentionally sitting with the lunar energy at a time when maybe it is in the spotlight or amplified. Although, of course, you don't have to wait for those days or those times. You can do it whenever.
Yeah, yeah. In my experience, especially if you're at the beginning journey of building a relationship with the planets, The planets just love effort. They love that
Yes.
we are even just trying to build a relationship with them. And like that, the moon days, or like just planetary days or planetary hours, which is what they're called, they're great, but absolutely not necessary in the beginning. It's like when you want to do more like specific work, especially like a ritualistic work, that is definitely something that is more important. Um, and actually also point we have somewhere on our slides the fact that if you are doing these things, the moon is like the position of the moon is like the most important thing in a
This
chart
is
if
true.
you're trying to do like talismans or any sort of other spell work. The way the moon is
Oh
positioned.
my goodness. Yes. I literally just went through this with figuring out when to post the the launch for my experiential guide to Jupiter in Cancer that I just put out last week. I don't even know
Shout
how
out to
many
that.
election charts, thank you. I don't even know how many election charts we pulled, but like we were tweaking it and we were going back and forth like, oh well, should we have me post it in my time zone or you post it in your time
Mm,
zone? Like
yeah.
what has the better chart here? And it's definitely fun to do that, but yeah, the moon and its position, how it's doing it trumps literally everything.
Yeah, and even in like again you mentioned electional astrology, which is a specific branch of astrology which would elect a specific date and time to start something, maybe also end something. Um in all of that, the position of the moon extremely important. Um
It
so
basically
yeah.
tells you the outcome or like
Mhm.
how it's going to be received.
Yes, and even in another branch of astrology, like horary astrology, there too, the moon is
Oh
gonna
yes.
like kind of tell us what the outcome is because the moon is so fast moving. So it's like
Mhm.
it's deeply important. Like, what is it? Like, what is the planet it's aspecting right now? What is the next planet it's gonna aspect? Like, all of this gives us so much insight. So, like, the importance of the moon in like pretty much everything, and you could say the realm of fate and fortune in that case, the most important one.
It just the moon is such a good storyteller. And I mean, for me personally, I think one of the full reasons why I was drawn into the art and practice of astrology is because of its capacity to tell a story and develop our own personal mythologies and deepen the
Mhm.
relationship with the world around us. But the moon having such a deepening effect on whatever story is being told through the chart of a moment or for a person. um, just the importance of that cannot be overstated in my mind.
Yeah, yeah, and again, that's why, yeah, like just talking to the moon, I feel like that's why it feels so nurturing because yeah, the moon's such a good listener.
Yes.
I feel like it just like is there and listens. Some other planets don't really always feel that way, but the moon really certainly does. So it's great for everything you want to get off your chest, everything you don't feel comfortable saying to another person. And again, it's so easy to do because it's so visible. I mean, other planets like
Yes, it's the closest
yeah,
planetary body to us here on Earth.
exactly.
So having
Exactly.
it be the first planet to really build a relationship with, great to start.
Yeah, and the others you can, I mean, sometimes we see like Venus or Mars or like, even Jupiter and Saturn with the naked eye, like as stars. You have to obviously know what they are. It's not
Yes,
that easy. But the moon is like super easy to spot. Like if you see it, it's like that's the moon. So it's very easy to like have it as a planetary body to first start building a relationship with. And I feel like when you get that experience, you're kind of also gonna get a better intuition to start building relationship with maybe the other planets, or it's going to be easier because you kind of work through that first layer. Yes.
I agree. It's a great launching point to orient yourself to to the rest of the cosmos.
Great. Well, is there any other points you want to make in with that? Or because what we wanted to do for like the end, I feel like that's very fitting, is to just like recite the Orphic hymn to the moon, which is
Yes.
actually also something which what you can do if you want to build a relationship to any planet, or a lot of deities. There's Orphic hymns to a lot of things.
Yes.
But it's like if you want to invoke the planet specifically, or maybe you're sitting at your altar, you don't physically see the moon, reciting the Orphic hymn, or also other hymns to the moon can be very helpful and useful to just like bring that energy. And that's also what we're gonna close it with. And I'm gonna let Shay read that, and that's how we're gonna end this today.
Thank you so much. All right. Here is the Orphic hymn to the moon. And traditionally, in the Orphic tradition, the moon is referred to as Selene. So here is Selene's Orphic hymn. Here, goddess queen, diffusing silver light, bull-horned and wandering through the gloom of night, with stars surrounded and with circuit wide, night's torch extending through the heavens you ride. Female and male with borrowed rays you shine, and now full orbed, now tending to decline. Mother of ages, fruit producing moon, whose amber orb makes night's reflected noon. Lover of forces, splendid queen of night, all seeing power bedecked with starry light. Lover of vigilance, the foe of strife, in peace rejoicing and a prudent life. Fair lamp of night, its ornament and friend, who gives to nature's works their destined end. Queen of the stars, all wife Diana, hail, decked with a graceful robe and shining veil. Come, blessed goddess, prudent, starry, bright. Come, moony lamp with chaste and splendid light. Shine on these sacred rites with prosperous rays, and pleased accept thy suppliant's mystic praise.
Woo! Well, that's great. I love all the Orphic hymns. I use them so much to invoke um the planets.
Yes. And I
Yeah.
don't know if y'all heard that little bit in there towards the end where it's like, who gives to nature's works their destined end.
Mm,
Literally what you were saying about the moon being tied into to fate and fortune.
yes.
Like the moon plays very heavy hand in all of that.
Yeah. Yeah, I love it. And now to get back to us, or just to like properly end this. Um, First of all, if you enjoyed this episode, which again is going to be on YouTube and on Spotify, I think on YouTube, definitely in video format, and Spotify, not sure yet if just audio. In any case, we would like if this video was useful, super grateful if you just give it a thumbs up or maybe a rating if you are on Spotify, and even just like messaging us or leaving a comment, like warms our lunar hearts because it's nice knowing how things land. Like otherwise, you don't know maybe the impact of your words, and it's just nice knowing like where it
Yes.
landed. So don't be shy, even if you don't feel comfortable commenting, like just privately messages, okay? Like it's the moon, like you can be private about it. Um, so there's that. And again, if you want to stay tuned for like the whole, I mean, we're just at the beginning. Mercury's gonna be up next. That's gonna be completely different.
Yes.
So there's like so many planets to talk through. And if you want to stay along for the ride, definitely consider subscribing. You can do that either on YouTube and on Spotify. And yeah, I'm also absolutely active on Instagram and usually do like a shorter post of all of that on there. So totally worth following me on there, but also totally worth following Shae, aka martianlune, on there. So I'm gonna let you shout out your socials, and also shout out that wonderful Jupiter in Cancer guide. as
Oh,
well. It's
thank you so
great.
much. Yes, the Experiential Guide to Jupiter in Cancer is my most recent project, and it's a guide co-created with my colleague Rashima of Sacral Mystic. And it's a 99-page guide that is segmented through the phases of Jupiter's year-long transit in Cancer. It's filled with rituals, tarot spreads, journal prompts to help you process and regulate throughout the season of great change and fluctuation. And so much of the guide has been created with lots of lunar love, following many of the lunar transits that we'll experience in the coming year. But you can find me at martianlune on Instagram. You can find me at martianlune.com to purchase the experiential guide to Jupiter in Cancer or check out my other services. And you can find my writing at venusianrevolution.substack.com. Thank you so much for having me on the Resonance Astrology podcast, Amiya.
Great. Yeah, I love this. It was very flowy like the moon. So I really enjoyed it. And yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed it too. And I hope to see you soon. Bye bye.
Bye.